Thank you for the invitation to today's session. I will share my screen. I hope you can all see it. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I will present a little bit our regular research on social innovation labs, and I will follow up with a reflection about what's the role of universities in those different social innovation labs that we looked at. This role of the universities is not the focus of our research, so it's more kind of observations that I will end with. So those are the labs I'm going to talk about. Maybe 2 sentences about myself. I started teaching social entrepreneurship in 2007 at different universities, Heidelberg, Portland State, Darmstadt, and now in Trier. I initiated the first social innovation lab in a social service organization, a nonprofit social service organization in 2013. And we started doing research on social innovation labs 2014, so 10 years ago. The first labs that we also did research on are collaborations between universities and social enterprises, particularly non-profit social enterprises in the German social welfare sector. The first was kind of a pilot. The second intralab was a program that ran over 4 years. So it had 4 cycles, a total of 80 participants in 40 teams from 27 organizations. And then at Trier University, we also started such a lab that we called University of Trier Intrapreneurship Lab. Intrapreneurship because the people that are developing solutions in those labs are actually employees of social service organizations. They have identified a social need and they develop a solution for this social need. The role of the university in each of those cases was to do research on what's going on, what people learn in those labs, what the outcomes are. But we also did some formative evaluation in and feeding back some of our insights into the concept development of those labs. We also have implemented the lab method, if you want, into executive and higher education. So there was an executive education program, a European one, where we used the lab methodology to train if you want, leaders of nonprofit social service organizations from different countries. It was a collaboration between 4 universities. And we also have implemented social entrepreneurship education and social innovation education at Trier University for our students in social sciences and humanities with the help of the Federal Ministry for Education and Science in Germany. And last but not least, we were engaged in setting up social innovation labs in the field of home care in 9 different countries. The project was called DCare Labs. So there the university also helped to develop the concepts for those different labs. And the latest project is Caring Communities, where we look at, from a research point of view, on how regional social innovation initiatives actually contribute to broader social change. But let's say overall lab format is something that most of you will know, so I will not go much deeper into that. So employees from social service organizations identify needs, social needs, and then they develop a solution for this need in a process between 6 and 9 months over a series of workshops using design thinking, lean startup, business model generation, and agile work as methods to do so. The goals of those labs are usually personnel development, so increase the entrepreneurial orientation of staff, develop an innovative social service, and also give impulses to the change of organizational culture of those organizations that actually send employees in the labs. The dimensions of our regular research, so to speak, are maybe not the main focus of our session today, so I'll just briefly mention them and give you a couple of examples. The first is we want to know what people learn when they participate in such an innovation lab. So we look at social entrepreneurial competences development. We also want to know if there are impulses for the organizational culture of those organizations who send employees to those social innovation labs. We want to know more about the outcomes and the impact of those social innovation labs, particularly how do those social services look like that are implemented there. And again, the latest project where we don't have any results yet is the contribution of social innovation initiatives to broader social change or broader social transformation in one particular field. In our field, it's the field of home care. Well, okay, what's the research instruments that we use? We have adopted the entrepreneurship competency framework for social entrepreneurship, and we try to measure social entrepreneurial competence with this framework. When we look at changes in organizational culture, we use the cultural assessment, the organizational cultural assessment instrument from Cameron and Quinn. And when we look at social impact, it's actually a little bit more complicated in those labs because really talking about the impact of the labs means to follow them and the different projects that were developed in those labs over a long period of time. So we have started retention studies on the participants of those labs. Just to give you a quick idea, when we look at the learnings, the individual learnings of participants of those labs, we see a number of competency areas that have developed more strongly than others, which is the sense that people learn how to develop ideas, how to use their imagination, and also to be able to uncover social needs. There is also a relatively strong increase that is important for us from a theoretical standpoint of dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity. Where we see lower increases are in ethical behavior because people in nonprofits already have high standards of ethical behavior and they don't increase it over this 6-month period of a lab. Well, which is a little bit more frustrating is that the overall understanding of economic and financial concepts also doesn't increase much while participating in a lab. When we look at impulses to the organizational culture of people sending employees to social innovation labs, we, since 2 years, 2-3 years, we're now experimenting with this OKAI framework. It's a relatively simple framework that does a values-based assessment of organizational culture. And so you can see there are two important dimensions. One is stability and control versus flexibility and discretion. And the other one is having an internal focus of the organizational culture versus having an external focus. So what we see is that a traditional nonprofit social service organization in Germany, if I'm talking stereotypes now, is more on the left-hand side, so has more a clan or hierarchy culture. The focus is more internal, and usually it's also more on stability and control. So our question is, when people really have participated in the lab and they go back in their organization, does this give an impulse towards a more autocracy kind of culture? And actually, that's something that we can see. So here is an example from one case of a lab where the method also asks about how would people assess the organizational culture right now and how is it desired. And you can see that particularly in this case, the now culture has moved more towards autocracy, but also the desired culture has changed a little bit. In this is an example where we only have one participant from one organization. And here is an example where you can see we have several participants and also the manager of this organization that has sent people to the lab. And we see different assessments of organizational culture between the two groups, so the participants and managers. So I'm just telling you this to give you an idea, how are we trying to measure the impact of participation in social innovation labs. Another thing that's more qualitative is we also ask participants, how would you describe this lab? And people would say, well, it's important that there is this boundary to my daytime job. It's a refuge, it's a learning space, it's a space for experiment, it's a reflective space, a collaborative space. And some even say it's a stage, and that's because of all the pitches that are going on in social innovation labs. So our intermediate results here are that we see, particularly in the wished organizational culture, a strengthening of informal and creative processes. So in terms of retention, so we asked participants in one particular lab that had 80 participants in 40 teams, 33 of them responded to our survey, but we could only use 25 of the data sets. And you can see that out of the 32 teams that have worked on social innovations in those social innovation labs, 9 have actually implemented it. It's a little less than a third, which is not too bad. Then the project was not continued in 13 of the cases. And 2 already said that the decision not to follow up on the project was already done in the lab. There was the pandemic also in this period of time that was also the cause for some of the people not following up. What else from the retention study? We know that the Social Innovation Lab only covers a small period of time of the whole project, the social innovation project to be developed. And so people are between 6 and 9 months in this lab, but the minimum duration of an innovation project that comes out of a lab has 22, 24 months. That's also not very surprising. The average time invested in those innovation processes was 120 days. Invested were between 1 and 3. The time of 1 to 3 employees. Costs were around 30,000 on average, within a big range. And then we see all different kinds of outputs that came out in these different solutions. And I will not cover them right now, but if you have questions about that, I'm happy to talk more about it. How are we addressing the question of social impact? So in each of the projects, we try to identify, sorry, this is in German, but I'll explain what's on there. So we work with the teams, or the facilitators in the labs work with the teams, and that they clearly identify their target groups, their intention, and also they clearly develop impact indicators. And we encouraged, and the facilitators in the labs encourage the teams to really measure their impact based on those impact indicators. And that's the way that was chosen. And what we do is we try to support them in their measurement 3 years after the lab has ended. So that's kind of what we usually do when we look at social innovation labs. We look at the learning, we look at the impulses to organizational culture, and we also look at the retention and impact. And we didn't do research on the role of universities in those social innovation labs, but here are some observations. The observations is that the role of the universities in those different projects is diverse. So in the first project, LADU, the university was a partner of running the lab. The university was involved in the co-design of this lab concept, and it also helped in workshop facilitation. It also provided research, or did research. In the second lab, there was research on the individual and organizational learning and impact, but it also did some formative evaluation, which again was fed back into the concept development. In the third lab, until the university even was the lead partner, but only as a project, because there was no continued funding for that. So the university was able to do that for 2 years, and it was funded by a foundation, a private foundation. But after that, the university decided not to put any money into this project anymore. So we as faculty members really need to look for external funding. The role of the university was also to be not only a lead partner, but also the organizer of external and internal knowledge for the lab teams. So when they came with a need, they needed know-how and input from different academic disciplines, and we organized it for them. So we invited colleagues, but particularly we also invited PhD and master students to come to the lab and work with the teams on their topics. So that was expert input. And again, there was research on what was going on in the way how I described it. SEED is a specific case. It was an executive education program, so that for universities were training providers, and again, they organized external and internal knowledge for the lab teams in the executive education program. In DCARE labs, the role of the university really was to initiate and to help with concept development of 9 individual labs in 9 different countries, and then bring together the lab organizers and go through with them through a process that we call Lab the Lab. So the idea of this project was to have an innovation lab, and the question was, how do we set up an innovation lab in this particular country with this particular topic? And that was facilitated as well, this Lab the Lab idea, by university members. And then there is the German lab in this context, and this has university members as well as experts giving input and working together with the lab teams, the innovation teams at certain workshops. And in the last project, it's really, it's more research, looking at the networks of the social innovation labs that are part of that project. So I think one of the core roles of the university in this project of fostering creativity and innovation is to make sure that there is a sufficient amount of diversity, of functional diversity in the innovation process, which means bringing in different types of knowledge, organizing people that have a different perspective and that play different roles, have a different function, make sure that projects think about to include stakeholder groups that are relevant for the idea. And universities have the methods know-how, but they also have the content know-how to allow for this diversity. So I would say this is a key role for individual creativity in the social innovation lab processes, as well as organizational innovation. And here is a very simple and probably simplistic idea for the discussion. So if I look at a traditional German nonprofit social service organization, they're very good in improving things. Okay, so they are very good at making their projects better, doing organizational learning a little bit, organizational development. What they usually don't do is take a whole lot of risk to develop a really radically new project and program. And this is where they need support in terms of knowledge, but also in terms of methods how to actually do that. And we as a university, we bring the methods and the knowledge that can help them to do both, to exploit in a way of, making things better, as well as explore. And both is coming together in the social innovation labs that we looked at. Those are my brief ideas, and hopefully there is something that we can discuss together. Thank you.